The land didn't know my name, but it knew my hands. It knew the way I packed salt into the troughs before sunrise, the way I welded the south gate shut in the middle of a lightning storm, because the calf wouldn't make it through the night otherwise. It remembered the sound of my boots in mud, how I walked the fence line after every storm, one step, one sigh, one screw tightened with my bare hands. They called me Lark, not short for anything. Just Lark like the bird, Grandpa said, 'cause I was up before dawn and hard to catch. I was the only girl in the family, the only one who stayed after the funeral, the only one who didn't leave when the taxes stacked like poker chips and the well coughed more air than water. Tanner left first, said there was nothing scalable here. Then Clay started a crypto fund with 0 cows but lots of words. Aunt Jeanette moved to Houston, turned Grandpa's wedding photo into wall decor. Uncle Darrell stayed, but only to supervise. Me, I stayed. I learned to weld. I fixed the pump when it screeched like a dying throat, rewired the shed, crawled under machines that could crush me just to keep the feed moving. I wasn't just helping out. I was holding it up, not because they asked me to, because Grandpa once looked me in the eye, just once, and said, "If the land ever forgets us, Lark, you remember it loud enough for both." And for a long time, that was enough, until it wasn't. It rained the morning he died. That soft kind of rain, the kind that doesn't make the news but soaks the earth just wrong enough to ruin planting. We buried him in silence. No slideshow, no eulogy. Just dust, denim, and a preacher who mispronounced his middle name like it didn't matter. Then we went inside, 13 people. 1 den, 0 apologies. Uncle Darrell stood by the fireplace, manila folder in one hand, beer in the other. Didn't sit, didn't wait, just said, "Let's get this over with." The will was typed, crisp, cold, clean, like fences Grandpa built, strong but designed to separate. Aunt Jeanette got the antique rifles, Darrell got the east pasture. Tanner and Clay split the contracts, the tractors, the bank accounts. Me, I got one line. We acknowledge Lark as someone who has always loved this land. That was it. No acres, no title, not even the saddle-eyed restored for Grandpa's birthday. Just love. The kind you can't deposit. The kind that vanishes the moment ink dries and your name isn't on it. I didn't cry, didn't blink, didn't speak. I just sat there, staring at a line that wasn't an oversight. It was erasure, not accidental, not passive, on purpose. And the next morning I left. I didn't pack much, just my welding helmet, 3 flannel shirts, and the coffee mug Grandpa carved my initials into back in 09. No note, no goodbye, just silence. The kind you don't announce. The kind that says, "This isn't a tantrum, it's a conclusion." I drove south, until the past got quiet, until the road signs started to blur, until the voice in my head finally said, "That's enough now." I found a garage apartment behind an old bookstore in East Austin, the kind of place that smelled like glue and paper dust, the kind of place where the water ran brown for 30 seconds every morning, but the lock worked, and the air was mine. No one asked me to babysit their kids. No one called me helper. No one looked at my hands like tools they didn't have to thank. I got a job in 3 days. People always need welders, especially the kind who don't talk much but always show up. Day shifts paid the rent. Night shifts paid the debts I'd swallowed in other people's names. Loans for the barn roof. Feed bills I was too proud to ask them to split. They called me independent. What they meant was disposable. I didn't check the ranch weather, didn't look at Jeanette's photos of the new era. All posing, no plowing. Tanner in loafers on the tractor he didn't know how to start. Clay holding up his phone like that could keep cattle alive. I wasn't running. Running means you're scared. I was leaving, and this time I meant it. The first summer was dry. The second one broke records. The kind of heat that splits fence posts, that turns topsoil to dust, then carries it away like it was never there. The cattle dropped weight fast. The pond turned from shimmer to mud and then to memory. The backup well failed, not cracked, not clogged. Just failed because someone forgot the filter I replaced every spring for 6 years. They tried YouTube, bought the wrong parts, hired a guy who took a deposit and left behind a hole full of pipe and lies. The land was choking, and they were drowning in it. I didn't know because they told me. I knew because drought spreads faster than gossip in a small town. A former ranch hand sent me a DM, one photo. The pasture, bone dry. The barn roof, caved in. Even the old maple grandpa planted back in '74 had dropped its leaves like protest signs. No caption, just 5 words. Thought you'd want to know. But I said nothing, because the only thing louder than a dried-up well is the silence of the one who used to keep it flowing. It started with a text from Aunt Jeanette. "Hey, sweetie, hope you're doing okay. Quick question, do you still have the diagram for Grandpa's irrigation system? The main well's acting up, might be urgent. Sweetie, not. How have you been? Not. We miss you. Not even, we're sorry. Just urgency, dressed in sugar." I didn't respond. 2 days later, Clay texted. "Hey, so Mom said you built the backup pump system before you left. We can't get pressure past the first valve. Can you come down this weekend? Shouldn't take long." Shouldn't take long, like my silence was a scheduling issue. Like I was a wrench they hadn't used in a while. I stared at the screen, typed slow. "Call someone else." 3 dots, then silence. Then came Uncle Darryl. "No, sweetie. No warm-up. You don't have to be dramatic, Lark. We didn't think you needed anything from the will. You've always been independent. We figured you'd understand." Independent. That word again. Polished like a trophy, used to cover guilt like paint covers mold. I laughed. Alone. In my grease-stained apartment, halfway through leftover chili, with a hole in the wall I never fixed. Independent. As if competence is grounds for exclusion. As if doing things well means you don't deserve to be included in the first place. They didn't forget me, they erased me. And now that the systems I kept alive are dying one by one, they remember. That night, I opened my old laptop, found the blueprint. Version 7.3, the one only I had, hovered, then deleted it. No backup, no message, because they didn't ask for help. They expected it, and I wasn't offering it anymore. They were knocking on the door of a well they sealed shut themselves. I was just the echo they thought would answer anyway. They showed up on a Tuesday, late afternoon, sun glaring against the lobby glass like truth catching up. I was halfway through reheating leftover chili again when my phone buzzed. "Hi, Miss Winslow, there are 3 visitors downstairs asking to come up. They say they are your family." "Family?" I asked the front desk. "Did I invite them?" A pause. "They say it's urgent." I replied, "Then they can urgently wait." And I hung up. But I didn't go back to the chili, didn't sit, didn't hide. I stood, breathed, and grabbed my keys. Took the elevator down, not to open the door, just to look through it. The lobby was mostly glass, modern, clear, clean. They were just outside. Aunt Jeanette in her beige coat, expression pulled tight like it might crack if I looked too long. Uncle Darryl, arms crossed, jaw clenched, like control was something he could still hold. Clay stood behind them, pretending this was normal, pretending this was fine. I stepped into the frame of the automatic door, not through it, just far enough for the glass to acknowledge me, let them see I wasn't hiding. Jeanette moved first. "Lark, sweetheart, please, we need 5 minutes. I shook my head. "No, you don't need 5 minutes. You need water, you need me, that's all." Her face cracked just slightly. "That's not fair," I cut in. "Neither is riding me out of the land I kept breathing, but here we are." Darryl spoke next. "We're not here to argue. You're here," I said, "to convince me to fix what you broke, again." No one spoke, just the hum of the automatic doors waiting to slide shut again. I took a breath. "You built a system that only works if I forget what you did, if I pretend your choices were just oversights." But they weren't. I didn't forget, I just finally believed myself. Clay opened his mouth, then closed it. You erased me when it cost you nothing. Now that it costs you everything, you remember my name. I stepped back. The door slid shut between us, and that was the loudest goodbye I've ever given. I didn't post a rant, didn't write a thread, didn't drop screenshots or names. I didn't need a crowd to agree with me. I just needed a line drawn quiet, drawn once. That night, I opened my banking app. There it was. Recurring transfer, ranch utility account $187, 29/month. Set up 3 years ago, still running, cancel, scroll, next. Feed supplier auto pay link to my backup account. Cancel, next. Emergency vet fund set to auto replenish for cattle that no longer remember my voice. Gone, one by one. Unplugging systems they never thanked me for but always expected to hum quietly in the background like air conditioning, like running water, like loyalty. They thought silence meant servitude, that I'd still be the wrench under the floorboards, that I'd keep the pipes alive because I loved the land. But love is not a utility, and I'm not a backup generator. I wasn't turning off the water. I was turning off the permission. I wasn't punishing them. I was removing myself from their survival equation, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Then I did something they didn't expect. I signed a lease, not for an apartment, not for a backup plan, for land, 3 acres, 2 hours east, no mailbox, no internet, just raw soil, a creek that hadn't dried in 20 years, and a tin-roofed shed that smelled like cedar and chance. The woman who sold it to me didn't ask why. She didn't say, starting over, huh? She didn't offer advice, didn't soften her voice. She just handed me the pen, watched me sign, then shook my hand and said, "This place needs someone who'll respect it." I nodded, not own it, respect it. It was the first time the ground beneath me didn't carry someone else's name, didn't ask me to prove myself, didn't need me to fix the sins of men who thought land was inheritance instead of responsibility. I didn't frame the deed, didn't post it, didn't send a copy to anyone. I just folded it, slid it into a drawer next to the matches and the spare keys. Right beside another folder, the old one, the will, the one where my name was a whisper near the bottom. I didn't burn it. I didn't need to. Some endings don't need fire, just distance. That night, I stood on the back porch. The tin roof clicked in the cooling air. Somewhere down by the creek, frogs were singing a song they didn't need me to understand. I held a chipped mug of coffee, the same one Grandpa carved. My hands still smelled faintly of tomato vines. I'd planted 3 that morning. No one watched. No one clapped. Just soil and sun, and a silence that didn't ask anything from me. I wasn't waiting to be included, wasn't hoping to be seen. I wasn't holding my breath for love that had to be earned. Because now, I breathe just fine without permission. A month later, a letter came. Cream envelope, familiar handwriting, no return address. That kind of careful that screams, "Don't throw this out, it's important." I didn't open it. I didn't need to know what apology they were practicing now. Didn't need to read, we didn't mean to. Or we thought you understood, or family's complicated. Forgiveness isn't a performance I owe, and regret sent late still arrives empty. I placed it beside the will, 2 folders, 2 closed chapters. No bookmarks, no highlights, no need to revisit, just paper. One that tried to define my place. One that tried to reclaim it. Some people think closure comes in replies, in tearful reunions, in long conversations over coffee. But sometimes closure is just not answering the door. Sometimes it's letting their words stay unread so yours don't get overwritten again. That envelope didn't carry peace. It carried a rope they hoped I'd tie myself back to them with. But I've learned you don't owe anyone your undoing. That evening, I stood on the back porch. The tin roof above me clicked in rhythm with the cooling air. Crickets tuning up. Frogs humming somewhere near the creek. The kind of peace that doesn't ask if it's enough because it already is. I held a chipped mug of coffee, same one Grandpa carved. My hands still smelled faintly of earth and tomato vine. 3 rows, 12 sprouts, all mine, no plaques, no contracts, just roots and the freedom to tend them. I wasn't waiting to be invited, wasn't hoping someone would finally say, "You mattered." Because I do. I mattered when I welded the pump with a flashlight in my mouth. I mattered when I fixed things they never thanked me for. And I matter now in a place that only asks for care, not legacy. They didn't write me into their future, so I built one where they couldn't follow, not out of vengeance, out of vision. I don't need their name on my land, because every time something grows here, quiet, slow, green, it remembers mine.